This endgame build has heavy damage and fast-paced DPS. It combines the high damage with fast-paced shocks that consistently trigger the passive skill Herald of Lightning. This build is capable of taking down the majority of rare level enemies in tier 16 maps, along with the magic and normal groups with just galvanized shards alone. Because of the high damage output, I run mid-level defenses with near cap resistances. My life is also on the lower end. This is typically enough to keep myself from sudden death with most of the one-hit KOs, though it doesn't take too many hits to kill me. This build relies heavily on killing the enemies before they can kill you. So I chose Witch Hunter for my Ascension because of both Culling Strike and Decimating Strike. Culling Strike instant KOs enemies at the 5 through 30% range of HP, and Decimating Strike immediately removes that same amount of the enemy's HP on the first strike before actually applying my own damage. This build only uses the crossbow. I have no reason to mix it up at the moment. If you're playing on hardcore, then this build would need gear adjusted for better defenses because you may find yourself getting a bit careless, flying through the map and mowing everything down. I know I do. I won't be going over the gear due to the RNG nature, and everybody's really going to be using something different to complete this build. Here are the skills used in this build. Many of these skills have been fully unlocked. If you don't have your slots completely unlocked, just be sure to not ignore the utility support gems that do make this work. So this first one, Galvanic Shards, is the bread and butter AOE for this build. I don't bother with electrocuting the enemies because they don't live long enough for it to matter. I found having the stats from a rare glove more useful in this kit than Kitiko's gloves, and they changed the electrocute support skill to no longer let the supported skill gem shock when using it. The reload can also be a bit clunky when swapping between different ammo, so it's avoided here. The first support gem I use is Lightning Penetration. This one allows me to penetrate 30% more of the enemy's elemental defense. With this, the amount of resistance I ignore is 90% total. This helps me keep the damage high with minimal reduction. So Shards by default is a relatively weak skill, so anything we can do to keep the damage as high as possible helps make this work. So the second gem I use is Lightning Infusion. I have no use for cold or fire damage, so giving the skill an extra 25% lightning damage is pretty huge. The third gem I use is Martial Tempo. This 25% attack speed boost not only massively speeds up the shooting, but it also helps me to increase the reload by almost a full 0.1 seconds. Fourth gem I use is Long Shot. The goal for this is for enemies to die fast, before they can even reach you. This 35% boost damage helps make this a reality. You could also use Close Combat if you react too slowly or would just prefer to move a little quicker through the maps rather than just stopping at a distance to hit them. This would also help more in close spaces. Really, the stronger you are, the less you'll be stopping and you'll just be running and shooting. So the final gem, this one here is Primal Armament. This gem's just another elemental damage boost. This gives another 25% more weapon elemental damage. With this setup, you're going to be shooting your shot fast and hard. It reloads very quickly with this build, so there's going to be little extra downtime between rounds. So next, we're actually going to look at the passive skill Herald of Thunder. This is a very important skill here. It appears to have very low DPS, but it procs so frequently the numbers shown here are a bit misleading. This skill is constantly up, dealing out AOE blasts to the groups that I hit. Every time I kill a shocked enemy with galvanized shards, I gain 5 charges for Herald. The charges appear up here in the top left, you can see it right here. In the process, some get shocked and killed immediately, refreshing my Herald charges. This creates a never-ending loop. The 5 charges in total dish out over 20,000 extra AOE damage on top of the 7,000 I get from galvanized shards. So the first support gem I use for this is going to be Innervate. Whenever an enemy is killed, I do get a buff that increases my lightning damage for 3 seconds. This will not only help finish clearing out the packs, but if there's another enemy nearby, it'll also clear that out as well. The second gem that I use is Coursing Current. I chose to use this skill as more of a utility rather than overloading it with damage. The passive lightning from these charges don't shock enemies by default, but it seems that there's a workaround using the support gem. As you can see in the buff list over here, let me bring that up. It shows that whenever I hit an enemy that is status that is already shocked from galvanized shards with the Herald's lightning, it then has a 50% chance to spread the shock status 2.5 meters around it. This helps to kill more shocked enemies and keeps my charges up while keeping the extra damage going effortlessly. I could be off on the explanation of this skill a little bit. The description on the gem itself and the buff window is slightly different, and usually when a skill gem doesn't do anything for a skill, it won't show up for me in the window off to the right. Either way, it seems to work in this build. The third gem I use is Magnified Effect. This is here to simply increase my lightning AoE by 40%. The fourth gem I use is Lightning Exposure. This also shows up in the buff list for my character and seems to work fine. When shocking enemies, this lowers their resistances even more. In this build, it may be a bit overkill, but it does max out our resistance penetration. Now, the fifth and final gem I use here is Blind. Because I don't have high defenses, I chose to throw this into the passive buff to allow me guaranteed blind on enemies. Having this on the passive buff beats wasting it on the actual skills I use. Might help. I haven't noticed too much of a difference, but then again, I don't get hit too often. All in all, this setup helps provide multiple buffs as well as a ton of extra AoE damage. So next we're going to look at the other passive skill. This one is Overwhelming Presence. This skill passively reduces the stun and elemental ailment threshold of enemies. Basically, it makes them much easier to stun and shock. As you already know, shock is very important to have up, but we also can utilize stun with one of our other DPS skills we'll look at shortly. For this build, you will need to get an extra 5 spirit from a piece of gear. The first support gem I use here is Cannibalize. This buff allows me to recover a base 4% of my HP every time I kill an enemy. This is one of the ways you will help keep your HP topped off if you don't take heavy damage. This helps with sustaining your flash charges as well. So the second gem I chose is Precision. This is a simple buff. It just increases my total accuracy by 30% to help ensure that I don't have any issues with enemy invasion. So far, so good. My skills typically show 100% accuracy when shooting shots. So the third and final gem here is Vitality. This gem allows me to passively regenerate a base 1% of my life every second. This works alongside Cannibalism to help keep my HP topped off. There's 2 more slots here that you can choose to unlock if you have the spirit for it. This was a very low priority for me, so I haven't gotten around to doing it yet. So back to the DPS skills. Next up we have High Velocity Rounds. This is a powerful hit that I save for when I need long distance nukes. I don't use it often, but if shards isn't going to be enough to fully penetrate defensives quickly, then I will use this after clearing the rest of the herd. I did not go full damage here, and I did allow myself some utility as well. The first support gem that I use is Scatter Shot. The downside of this gem is that it makes a skill do 20% less damage and makes it 20% slower. The upside though is that it now shoots 3 times. As long as you aren't swinging your aim around while shooting your shot, all 3 projectiles will usually hit the same target. This immediately triples the DPS of the skill, so the 20% loss doesn't really affect you all that much. The second gem I do use is Double Barrel. This one gives me an extra bolt at the cost of 30% slower reload speed. 30% sounds like a lot, but it's really not so bad. My reload speed right now is 0.39 seconds with this build. So the third gem I use is Ammo Conservation. This gem is one of the ways I keep the shots going a bit faster. Every time I use this skill, there's a 25% chance of it being free. You may find yourself shooting this skill off more than twice as much per reload depending on your luck. In total with this gem, I do have a 40% chance to not consume a bolt. So yeah, that's almost a 50-50 chance. You can see right here, 40% chance. This is because of the passive tree. We will be looking at that shortly. So the fourth gem I use here is Armor Explosion. This skill triggers Armor Explosion on full armor break. You will kill most enemies too quickly for this to matter. This can be changed to something else if you have any other preferences. Especially if you're a Gemling, you'll be able to benefit from using more than one of the same support gem on 2 different skills. So the fifth skill gem I use is Maim. When you're facing down a single enemy, you need to keep your distance as much as possible. This gem is going to allow you to stick the enemy hit with the 30% movement speed debuff as well as a 15% evasion debuff. I'm really just using it for the movement speed. So the fifth and final skill in this build is Plasma Blast, the Mac Daddy of DPS. I chose to stick this skill with a little utility rather than simply focusing on power again. It's already strong enough with only a little extra boosting. I really don't use this skill often either, usually as an opener for a boss or if I just feel like using it. One of the best uses for this skill though is one-shot kills on high-level rares. It even makes some floors in the trials a complete joke. The charge time is a ridiculous 2 seconds, so I did build around this a little bit to make it more bearable. So the first support gem I use is Lightning Mastery. This is a simple gem that just increases the skill level of a skill. One of the most powerful types of stats in the game. Big dick moves do require big dick DPS after all. The second gem I chose is Heft, and also just a simple DPS increase. 30% maximum physical damage is pretty major. It increases the maximum damage ceiling you can pull off with this shot. For me, it brought the maximum possible lightning damage from 260,000 to 325. When I said big dick DPS, I meant it. The third gem I have here is Mobility. Due to the long charge up time using this skill, I wanted to reduce the movement speed penalty so I can move 30% faster in the process. This helps the skill feel a little less cumbersome, although I still feel somewhat slow. With this gem, the skill is more viable to use in other places outside of boss openers and sniping rares. The fourth gem I have here in this set is Overpower. This mod causes 50% more stun buildup when hitting the enemy. I decided on putting it here instead of on high velocity because using this as a boss opener, I can then swap to velocity, get my first stun very quickly. It can realistically be swapped out with armor break if that's your preference. I do want to note that this doesn't show up in the info sheet for the skills, so I'm not really sure if it works or if it's potentially bugged. I do have high stun buildup with this build though, so I haven't felt the need to look further into that. So the final gem I'm using is Elemental Focus. This shot's equivalent to a nuclear weapon. I don't care what elemental status effects I have when using this, I just want big numbers. This is just here to further boost my DPS on the skill, and I don't find that removing the ability to land shock with the skill hurts me in any way. So the three main skills you will be using here is Galvanic Shards, along with the passives Herald of Thunder and Overwhelming Presence. Those three skills work seamlessly to maximize your DPS in this build. High velocity rounds and Plasma Blasts are more situational single target options if the need arises. Next, we're going to look at the passive skill tree. I'm going to show you what I believe the most important sections are. If you chose Gemling, feel free to use whatever skills you prefer. I haven't looked at the skill tree since I first made my choice of ascending. So starting with Ascendancy, I chose Witch Hunter, and the first three ascensions are all you really need to maximize this build. Concentration can be useful, but it isn't necessary at this time. I haven't tested out Sorcery Ward yet, but again, I'm not in any hurry to try it out because I don't feel like it's a major element in this high damage build. Most efficient way for me was to first complete the Sect Trials with the one floor, then move on to the Trials of Chaos for the second set of skill points, then to move back to the 3 floors of the Sect Trials. You can do it however you want though. I don't know what the easiest way for the 4th set of points is because I get bored of Sect Trials and didn't really bother with Chaos Trials after the first time for the skill points. So the far right side with the AOE boost right here, and the 10% chance for killed enemies to explode is what I took first. This is a small chance, but it's enough to make a difference. It also only took 2 skill points to access. The next 2 sets of skill points went to unlocking Culling Strike and Decimating Strike. These skills give instant death to enemies at 5 through 30% HP remaining, depending on the rarity of the mob. Decimating Strike removes the same amount of an enemy's HP, again depending on the rarity, on full life enemies before even calculating your damage. These are extremely powerful together, and as an added bonus, the 2 smaller nodes give a combined total of 70% extra damage done to low life enemies. Low life counts as anything under 35% damage. This will matter more with the enemies with higher defenses. Now looking at the rest of the tree, most important nodes are going to be the reload speed, and they can be found in these 2 spots. This top section gives 70% reload speed increase, and the bottom section here gives another 30%. These will immediately double your reload speed. The faster you reload, the less downtime you have, and the faster everything dies. Next, we have the elemental nodes. Over on the right side, we have a section with lightning resistance penetration with some bonus dexterity. Down below, we do have a triangle here. So this ends up giving an extra 25% chance to shock and some bonus lightning damage. Let's see these around here. There's this one here I just haven't gotten yet. I'm going to once I level up a little bit more. Moving further down the line from there to the left is more penetration damage and a nice little node that turns your non-critical damage into lucky shots. What that means is that each time you damage someone with lightning, the game will roll the damage in the background twice, and the damage that you deal will be the higher number. This is not a crit build, so this is very useful to have. It also helps with the Plasma Blast damage RNG because we did increase the maximum potential damage by quite a bit. At the very bottom, here next to the reload speed, we do have some crossbow specific nodes here as well. They can help boost damage, a tiny amount of critical chance, attack speed, critical damage. The crit can be ignored if you choose to get more damage or defenses elsewhere. I just wanted the extra attack speed and a little extra crit, wouldn't hurt. On the other note here, I do want to point out this is reusable ammunition. It gives you another 15% chance to not consume a bolt when shooting your shot. This works together on the velocity skill you saw earlier. It gives me the total 40% chance of not using ammo when shooting. All the rest of the notes left on this tree are pretty much just your basic damage with the occasional minor buff. I did choose to take this path on the right to get a large boost to my evasion. And plus it was leading me to a jewel slot over here. Speaking of jewel slots, I do recommend these stats on all your jewels. Increased lightning damage, attack speed, damage with crossbows, attack speed with crossbows, and reload speed. All of this makes a huge difference on this build. I do have a total of 6 gems set at this time in this build. Over the next 14 levels, I may be able to add another socket. The raw damage nodes are probably the least important as you level up. You will have plenty of time in the endgame to continue boosting your damage to even greater heights that way, at the higher levels. I'm going to wrap this up with some footage showing this build in action. In in-game maps, tier 15, tier 16. Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you think about this build in the comments. Try it out, leave a like. I'll see you all next time.
Salvation awaits. Take back! Easy. Nice. Shocked! That's one down.